Thank you so much for being with us. Okay, so what is the difference between the skills living and the regular version? Is the content the same or different? And maybe we need to start, because there might be people who don't know what skills is.
Yes. So originally, probably more than 10 years ago now, we came up with skills, which was based on developmental levels. So we didn't go strictly by what development was showing about, we knew a baby walked before they talked. But we looked at every single aspect to see, like, in programming and creating treatment plans, how do you teach something? So one of the earliest skills is joint attention, which is being able to show someone of interest with your eyes and with your head, and and reading social cues is really difficult, but it comes at a really early age. But what we do is there's all these prerequisites. You have to be able to make eye contact, which is a deficit in ASD individuals, and then you have to be able to point, and you have to be able to do all these skills. So we had to teach all those skills first before you could actually teach joint attention. So a lot of skills, the basic curriculum is based on development, and we looked at a lot of standardized testing, looking at developmental criteria. When does a certain skill come? In the ASD community, is this true or not true? Are there prerequisites? So that's how the original curriculum was built for skills. When skills living, which is what actually people outside of CARD use, and if you're a CARD internal person, it's skills for life.
Okay.
That was a whole other issue, the naming. But we wanted a different, CARD people want what they want, and so that, that's what the name is for internally. But there are all these teenagers and adults coming in now, and there are all these skills that just needed to be taught. And the the individuals that come in teen years, they tend to really, their needs are completely different.
Yeah.
So it could be they've never had any intervention, therefore we're just starting out with functional language. Or it could be that they finished high school, but they have no friends, no job, no skills whatsoever, and we need to find something for them. And so as in skills, regular skills, there's 8 curricula, and it really is focused on development. In skills living or skills for life, we had to prepare for what are all the things that a teen or an adult would need to live independently. And so the curriculum area, there's 16 curriculum areas.
That's a lot.
And anything that was in the basic skills that we thought, okay, it's still relevant, we did pool a lot of those activities into skills for life.
Okay.
But there are all these other skills now, too, that are needed, such as independent living and personal responsibility and vocation, and all these other skills that are needed for these adults that aren't relevant to somebody below the age of 10.
Right. Like how to balance a checkbook.
Yeah, like why, well, there's adults who would say they don't need that now.
Right. Well, yes, there is that. But I mean, that kind, an 8-year-old, 10-year-old is not going to do that. But knowing how to manage your money, let's say that, not balancing a checkbook, you're not trying to accomplish that at 8 or 10 usually.
Yeah, and accessing your community, at an 8 or 10-year-old, you're hopefully still going to the library with your parents. You're not the one trying to get yourself a library card, although there are some kids who are independently doing that.
Right.
But it's not a skill that should be learned or would be helpful. Somebody hopefully is still guarding, watching them, parenting them. But for an adult, we had the other day, he had no clue like how to even fill out his insurance form.
Yeah.
He was coming into CARD. And we had to sit there and say one of the goals that we have for him that he would know his own health information.
Yes.
So he would be able to fill out his insurance card and what are my allergies? Do I have any preferences? What injuries I've had when they happened?
Yes.
So what we're finding with a lot of the adults coming is that's the basic part first because they have to get into CARD.
Yeah.
And so we're helping them do these things that are really basic skills that an adult would do, and they will be able to take that information and be able to use it hopefully for the rest of their life.
So on a basic level, skills living is the teen adult curriculum.
Yes.
And it's very individual specific.
Yes.
Where skills, the regular skills, the skills for autism, is the developmental thing for everybody from birth through age 8, 10, 11.
8 to 10, 11, yeah.
Yeah, somewhere in there. And it's still pretty individualized because they take an assessment and it's individualized. But the truth of the matter is that 3-year-olds on the spectrum tend to need things that
Well,
are
just
similar
play.
to other 3-year-olds.
Just like if I'm looking at a kid, I'm going to say, do you play?
Yeah.
You need to learn how to play. But when you're coming in at 15 or 20 or 30, I'm not asking if you're playing anymore.
Right.
I'm asking, actually, the more appropriate is, what do you do in your free time?
Yes.
What is your leisure time spent doing? I'm not going to go back and teach you imaginative play, because adults don't really do that anymore.
Yeah.
I'm going to come back and say, like, hey, where do you hang out with peers? Where do you do you have things that you do in your free time when you're alone
Right.
that's productive?
It's targeted toward their specific needs.
And it's giving them the respect.
Yes, there's
You
that
know, it's
too.
giving adults the respect, and the teens, the older teens, the respect that, there's all these things they didn't do, but there are still all these things they could do.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's important.
Absolutely.
We want to give them respectfully according to their age.
Yeah.
What are they actually doing? What music are they listening to? Can they find other peers that are similar ages being able to do the same things? Accessing their community, really.
Yeah.
It's giving them skills where they can go out in the community and find people. And they don't need a lot of people.
Yeah.
But they need someone to be able to share it with.
Absolutely. So now one of the questions that we do get about skills living on a regular basis, though, is it just for people who are very impacted, or is it just for people who are high functioning? Who's it for?
Well, that's why there's 16 curriculum areas, is because we're hitting the whole range.
Okay.
Because when they come in, we don't know what they have. Unfortunately, we still do get 20-year-olds who have no means of communication.
Right.
Functional communication. Therefore, we have a functional communication curriculum, and a lot of those activities in that curriculum you can see in development, in the basic skills, because everybody needs functional communication.
Yes.
Or adaptive skills in the same way. Everybody needs to know how to use a utensil to eat, be able to brush their teeth, and those are things that we're working on, below age 5. Hopefully. But if they come in at 20 and they still don't have those skills, we're going to go back and reach into those areas. And one thing about for Skills for Living that's really different is in skills, the basic skills, we ask you to do the whole assessment because we just want to know where the holes are and how they impact each other. But in Skills for Life or Skills Living, the person comes in saying, this is what I want to work on.
Yeah.
And they can pick and choose which areas that they want to work on. They don't have to do the assessment for all 16 curricula.
Right.
They just do what they want to work on at that time.
And in fact, in all probability, no one would probably need all of the things in Skills for Living. You might, just focus on one part of it and ignore the rest of it. And another person would focus on this part of it, ignoring that part.
Yes.
It really is that tailored. You don't need the whole thing.
You don't need the whole thing. And a lot of it, you'll see some cross-referencing, but for the most part, it depends on what your need is in an adult. As a teen and an adult, what do you need? What do you want to work on? And a lot of times we get the independent adults who come in and say, this is what I want to work on.
Yeah.
Sometimes we'll get the teens or adults who come in and they have a caregiver saying, this is what we need to work on.
Yes.
And sometimes we get the teens who say, yeah, I want to do this, but I really don't want to do other things. And then you have to talk them into doing prerequisites.
Right.
But,
well, and to be fair, if you don't know, there's one person that I really respect and admire on the autism spectrum who's an adult who for years was writing into us and saying, but I don't want friends.
Yes.
I don't want friends. I don't want to know about having friends. I'm not interested in having friends. I don't want lessons about that. Don't talk to me about having friends. And my position was always to him, I hear what you're saying, but until you know what it's like to have a friend, I'm not sure if you know what you're saying no to. Mm-hmm. And then he got a friend. And he said, okay, I get it now. And I'm glad that people kept pushing me to have a friend because now I see how wonderful that is. And you're right, I didn't know what it would be like to have a friend.
Well, and there's the other range where I've had, adults tell me, yeah, I don't want a friend, or a kid want friends. I said, well, what do you really want to do though? What are those goals? And so many other goals involved where they had to interact with people, and okay, if you want to do this, you have to be able to go out and, speak appropriately, have that social interaction. Yes, you're not looking for a friend, but you're doing this for all these other goals. And then in that process, they realize, I kind of like social interaction.
Yeah.
I kind of like people. And it surprises them, in that process. And that in itself is a huge a huge a learning situation where it wasn't their goal, but they found something in the process that benefited them.
Okay.
They really loved.
Love that. All right, we're going to take a short break and come back with more questions. Before we go to break, though, I want to address a parent wrote in and said, is there a place to get funding for tracking grants, that they've already applied for a grant to ACT, which formally ACT today, and that there haven't been enough funds. And I know that continues to be a problem, unless they make enough money, they can't fulfill even half of the grants that they get requests. And a tracking device is a really important thing. I'm not aware of anybody else besides ACT today that really works for a tracking device. However, the reason why is because a lot more insurances are covering it, and sometimes your state has a mandate. The state of New York has a mandate. If you're in the state of New York, you can get a tracking device. They have to pay for it. But a lot of states now, your insurance will pay for it. So I would immediately pick up the phone, call your insurance provider and ask them what they need. Just don't even say, do you fund this? What do you need from me? Do you need a doctor's excuse? What do you need to have for my child to have a tracking device? It's a matter of life and death. And then if they say, oh, nope, I've looked it up and it's not covered, then write me back and we'll try another venue.
Can
yes?
I add
Yeah.
something to that?
Yeah.
So I know at least 2 or 3 years ago, I haven't heard it recently, but I know some of the health insurance companies have a nonprofit division.
Ah.
So I know like United Healthcare actually had a grant
Absolutely.
pool
Yeah.
that they would take applications for these kinds of things.
Great point. Because I always love to tell people United Healthcare Children's Fund, you can apply for a grant of up to $5,000. But if your insurance will pay for it
Yes.
first, do that and apply for the United Healthcare grant for your copay and other stuff
Yep.
that you need. But thank you for thinking of that, because that is another venue. Okay, but get that tracking device. Do what you have to
Yes.
do, and write me back or call me back if you have no luck, because we want to make sure you get one. It is a matter of life and death. But when we come back, we're going to answer a question who came in from we have names for some of our viewers. So our West Virginia mom has written in a question, and we're taking that next. So stick with us. Anyway, having said that, I promised we were going to get to our West Virginia mom. She says, hey, Shannon, West Virginia mom here. I had previously talked about my daughter repeating herself after every sentence. We very recently went to the doctor because she has also started screaming randomly, and it seems involuntary. Now we're being told it's likely Tourette's.
Oh, wow.
And need to see a neurology because she could have been misdiagnosed with high-functioning autism instead of Tourette's, because Tourette's mimics autism if there are no tics developed yet. And she's got 2 question marks there. I have never in my life heard this and want some insight as to whether or not Tourette's and autism are that closely related that I missed it. I feel like a failure, honestly, because I wasn't hearing my daughter properly when she said, my brain won't let me stop. I'm a robot. I didn't understand she literally meant it was involuntary. I'm being told that Tourette's also encompasses sensory processing, social pragmatic language, and inhibition issues. Is all of this true? And thanks and much love to you all. And much love to you back. I clearly don't know. How much do you know about Tourette's, Evelyn? And help us out. Save us. I love Eliana Vincent when she does this and she says, save yourself. So Evelyn, save us.
I have experience with Tourette's,
Okay.
both actually internally with our kids, as well as one of my best friends has 3 kids with Tourette's.
There we go.
And it's interesting how they do crossover. Don't beat yourself up that it's one versus the other, because either way, both can learn through ABA.
There we go. Yeah.
I mean, ABA can teach anybody, I think, any skill if you really, target it. But for the most part, if, your kids are still young, ABA only helped, okay? With Tourette's, it's interesting in the sense that there is a lot of involuntary shrieks and tics and different things. And it happens a lot of times with most of the kids I know when anxiety actually increases. So when the kids are a little bit more stressed, their tics actually increase more.
Okay.
So a lot of what you're teaching a Tourette's child is coping skills and teaching them how to calm themselves. Because when they do calm themselves and they're able to recognize, okay, this is what's going on, you see a lot of their outside non-inhibitory type of behavior, actually it starts, you can inhibit it.
Okay.
It actually a lot of times comes down. I have to say with Tourette's kids, medication is actually a really great place to start. Getting a really good neurologist that specializes in pediatrics and Tourette's. The thing is, with autism and Tourette's, there is a wide range on both ends. It is the spectrum, I feel like. Because I have Tourette's kids who just, there's a little bit of tics and you can't tell a lot. And then I have my ones that come in and they're, it's constant tics. Initially, it's just like trying to get some control on that. One thing that is similar with a lot of the kids that are on both is they're very concrete thinkers. And so, in the autism world, we always say, they're really black and white thinkers. They don't see the gray. I see that in the Tourette's kids a lot.
Okay.
I see that same similarity. The Tourette's kids, when they're actually focused, get more of the hints of what's going on around them. They can read social cues better. A lot of times, though, if they're ticking a lot, they don't focus and their attention isn't on that.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah, so like I had a 13-year-old who's getting bullied, a Tourette's kid, and he was saying somebody else was bullying him, and it turned out it was another ASD kid, but he didn't know to tell his mom that the kid had ASD, even though he knew.
Okay.
And so the mom's saying, this kid's like in my face, da da da. And then I just happened to go pick him up with the mom. And I saw him, and immediately from far away, I knew oh, this is a spectrum kid.
Right.
So immediately I asked him, I said, does this kid have autism? And he's like, yes. And I said, do you know what autism is? And he actually could tell me what autism was.
Right.
But I was like, okay, let's talk about it in terms of you.
Right.
And how this child interacts with you. And then he was like, oh. And then he knew, okay, I need to be a little bit more compassionate. He doesn't understand. And then it kind of put the bullying into a different court.
Yeah.
And because he just wasn't reading it enough, even though he knew this information about this other kid, he didn't put it in context. But when I actually would focus him, he was like, okay, I know what to do now. And it's really interesting. So they don't have that, probably the social deficit.
And it sounds like that they have the perspective taking piece that a lot of times our kids don't have.
Yes, they definitely have perspective taking, but you have to stop them to actually think about the perspective taking.
Okay.
So a lot of, and it's the same thing with a lot.
That's adults.
Well, and that's the ADHD kids too. A lot of ADHD kids are so impulsive and going, and they never stop to read the cue that the other peer is really annoyed by what they're doing. And once you stop them, they're like, oh yeah.
But I think that's neurotypical adults in this society. When I see, the thing that makes me the most frustrated now in life is that I go, we spend a lot of time teaching my son who's on the spectrum perspective taking, and I'm frequently standing there talking to somebody who's an adult who doesn't have a disability, no disability. I leave room for the fact that maybe there's one that I can't see, but then you ask them and they go, no, I don't identify as being disabled. and they're not taking anybody else's perspective. I think that's rampant in the world.
Yeah. So with Tourette's, I would say definitely go to the neurologist.
Okay.
Go do a whole full evaluation, because medication actually has helped all the Tourette's kids I've worked with a lot.
Okay.
And just controlling the tics so that they have time to pay attention to what's going on around them.
Interesting.
A lot of kids with Tourette's, because they have the perspective taking, they actually are really embarrassed by all their tics.
Oh.
And it creates the social avoidance.
Right.
And it looks like maybe they don't understand,
right,
that social piece. But a lot of it is they're very, because they have that perspective taking.
Yes.
And they know, I look weird, or so-and-so's making fun of me, or whatever it is. They know that it's not right. They don't know exactly what it is. So a lot of times I'd say seek the medical field. Go look and talk to a doctor, because medication actually helps so much of the Tourette's things. And then after that, you can see what deficits are still there and not there. In my world, when people come in, they need an ASD diagnosis to get insurance funding.
Right.
But really, I tell the families, I actually don't really care about the diagnosis that much. I want to look at the child. What are they doing? What can't they do? And I'm going to address the deficits as they come, because overall it is improving quality of life.
Exactly.
In whatever form.
Now, I have a really probably not very intelligent question, but can you have autism and Tourette's?
Well, I'm guessing probably, in the new diagnosis of autism.
Yeah.
It leaves room for the genetic.
Okay.
The specifier saying if it does come from a genetic disorder or some other disorder. So when I started this 20 years ago, Rett, which is another disorder, and it was a pervasive development disorder. Nobody knew anything about it, so I'd get Rett kids who also had autism.
Yeah.
But now they know the genetics behind it. So now you could get ASD with a specifier that it's a genetic, Rett diagnosis. So there's a lot of changes. And for funding, that's usually the purposes of the diagnoses overall. But in terms of what you're teaching, it's all the same.
Okay. And for everybody watching, if you have a child with a Tourette's diagnosis, can that qualify you for ABA through your funding source?
I don't think there is any funding for it right now, for ABA.
Well,
I don't know. You need to look at it, but yeah, for those people, those families with Tourette's, this is something to go into the community and say, hey, we need this help.
We're seeing more and more families getting ABA services with an ADHD diagnosis.
And that's just in the last 2 years. There was actually the research article that came out that said medication and ABA had the same effect on the ADHD kid.
Love that. And you don't have the side effects of the medicine when you're doing, okay.
And the thing is, I want to say, I always say, let's do the behavioral first before the medication, but there are some diagnoses that the medication just helps a lot.
Yes.
And the thing is, there are families who don't want to try any medication, and actually I would probably be in that camp. But what I've learned over the years is that, if medication could help, just to take the edge off.
Yes.
Don't be afraid to try it, because just because you're using the medication now doesn't mean they're going to be on it forever.
Right. Absolutely.
It just doesn't require. So don't rule one way or another out. Talk to your medical professional.
But I love that you're already at the neurologist, and
that's the place to be first.
Sending you a hug. Okay, I'm going to move on to another question here. Hi, ladies. Thank you for your uplifting show. My 5-year-old is having a hard time with his pronouns, mainly the I, me, and my pronouns. When I refer to myself, I use the correct pronoun. I recently heard the BA refer to herself in the third person. Should I change my style? Is it better? Is a better way to do it? Any other tips are appreciated. This is a hard thing, the pronoun thing.
Yeah, pronouns are kind of funny to me, because initially when I remember coming into this field, that was one of the markers, is that they used inappropriate pronouns, and it's the I and you and me part. They can use all the other ones because they're very clear and distinct. Yeah. But so your behavior analyst, I'm going to take a guess. I don't know what she was doing there. But one of the procedures in teaching a child to use the correct pronoun is a shaping and fading method. Okay. So if I was talking to you and I was teaching you how to use I would say, I, Evelyn, would like for you, Shannon, to blah, 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 blah. Okay. And then I would slowly fade out the third person name so that the kids start to figure out that I'm pairing them so that they're similar, and I'm showing them it's similar. Right. And where they're used. And that is a technique that a lot of behavior analysts use, where they pair the third person with the correct person pronoun. Okay. So I would say, I, Evelyn, would like you to blah, 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 Right. Or you, Shannon, would do whatever the instruction is, and then I would slowly take away your name, fade out your name, fade out my name. Right. But just very methodically. So it's not, whether it's bad or not. But pronouns is one of those things where I always tell supervisors or BCBAs, it's one of those things you work on early, and it just kind of lingers over many years. Because I think you really do have to teach the kids how to use it, and then they have to to build it into their repertoire. Yeah. So I could have started pronouns on year 1 of ABA, and in year 4 still be doing some pronoun work, because I think initially they're trying to figure out what it is. Right. Like, what are these pronouns? And then at a certain point, they can self-correct. Right. And then at a certain point, they start making the changeover. Okay. And the fluency aspect of it. So
kind of like when you're working on a sound, because I know people go, oh, well, if you're going to work on it for 4 years, that sometimes feels frustrating and like we won't work on it. But, I know there are certain sounds that kids have difficulty making, like a TH sound. So we start working on it knowing that it's not going to change overnight. That we're in it for the long haul, but that is not a reason to just say, well, we're not going to work on it. Yeah, and the thing is, it's not like it's central to a program for 4 years. Right. It's running in the background. It's running in the background. It starts out very central as a specific lesson, and then it slowly goes to the generalization phase, and that generalization phase is probably where it takes the longest. Okay. And then building it into the fluency aspect, meaning
in time matters. How fast am I talking that I'm able to make that switch on that pronoun?
Okay. So keep that in mind.
Mhm.
Patience, patience,
Patience.
patience. Don't expect it to be overnight. I want to skip to a question. Hi, how many hours a week should my BCBA be training the behavioral assistant a week when they first start, and for how long?
Oh, that's
Love
a
your
big
opinion on that.
question.
Yeah.
That's a really big one. It depends. I can't give you a specific response to that one. You know, there is the theoretical knowledge aspect where, there's a lot of online e-learning programs like through the Institute of Behavioral Training, right? There is a module where we can give it to the behavior therapist and say, okay, that we're training you, here's the background, and you're not spending the one-on-one time with the kid, you're just learning like, what is a discrete trial? What is a behavior? What is a function? You're really learning basics. So there's that aspect where you could give that training in another method where you don't need the BCBA there.
Yeah.
And parents can buy it and have their person train. And then there's the other aspect of the practicum and learning, where it is someone with experience is with a child and the behavior technician, and being able to prompt them and show them how to do it in that practical time.
Yeah.
It ranges quite a bit. I used to do a lot of training in our expansion or what we used to call workshops. When there wasn't an office nearby, I would fly and I would spend 2 to 3 days, and they would be full days. They'd be 6 to 8 hours where I'm with the people that the family have hired, and I'm going to train them all to do actual behavioral techniques, as well as teach them what my programming is, what my treatment plan is for their child. And in 2 or 3 days, maybe it'd be 18 to 20 hours, I could get them to a place where I could guide them by phone or video.
Yeah.
But it really depends. Some people pick it up faster, some people pick it up slower. But it really is letting your behavior analyst should have a checklist of things that this person needs to learn.
Yeah.
And being able to go through it and giving them feedback in real time and saying like, have you mastered the skill? Yes, you have mastered it. Let's go to the next target. You're doing, how are you implementing this area? And being able to go through. So there's the basic learning what ABA is and implementing it, and then there's learning the treatment plan for your child.
Yes.
That could be a whole different piece.
Yeah.
And then if that person is working with more than one child, so kids on the spectrum can be totally different.
Yeah.
So the treatment plans can be different. Even the methodology could be different. It's all ABA, but under ABA is the umbrella, and then there's just different ways. There's the discrete trial therapy, there's natural environment training, there's pivotal response. There's just all these, and you choose what is appropriate to the child that you're working with. And so it could be specific training that has to go for that the behavior technician.
And just because the parent is asking this, it leads me to think that there's a bigger question here.
Okay.
Like, either the parent is, to me, this is what I read into it, that either the parent is saying, I think they're spending too much time on training and not actually doing therapy, or I hear every day from parents, I don't want somebody working with my child that isn't trained. And my thing that, I want to hug every parent who says that to me, because I was one of those people. I was like, my child is not a petri dish. They are not your guinea pig. I want the trained person. Give me the trained person. And now I make parents angry because I say, I know, I thought that, I felt that too. And you do want to have somebody on your team that is, a rock star and has been there and done that and seen that and has that kind of assurance. But what I learned 2020 hindsight was that all of the newer therapists, and I'm talking about card therapists, which means that they went through an extensive training before they ever got to my kid, but they were still new. That those are the therapists who ensured that we got where we wanted to go. Because as somebody explained to me, you're not trying to get your child to be able to interact with the best, most trained ABA professional in the world. You're trying to get them to be able to interact with the world.
Yes.
And those people don't know anything about ABA.
Yes.
And why not have them be with somebody who has a strong basic in ABA, but maybe doesn't know your kid and hasn't had all that many hours of experience, because they're the gateway to ensure that your child generalizes and to ensure that your child is ready for the world and the world is ready for your child. I am humbled now when I see my child interact with new people and have no problem whatsoever doing it, no matter what their accent is, no matter what their cadence is,
What they look like.
what they look like, how they present. My child does much better than my husband or I in interacting with people. Sometimes I'm like, what did he say? And my son is like, what is wrong with you? He said this, and I'm like, I'm not like my hearing. But I couldn't hear the accent and I couldn't decode and whatever. But my son can. And he knows how to repair the conversation when he can't. Because he had the right curriculum and because he didn't have people who always were like the best, highest, as a parent, that's what you want. You think you want. Give me the most trained ABA. I would like you. I would like for you, only you, to come and work with my child. And you would be brilliant. But having those other people really adds depth to the program and helps your child to generalize.
Yeah, that generalization piece. And also, it's one of the reasons we have a team of people. The child needs to know in a quick way that whether you are telling me this, you or you or you, it all means the same thing.
Right.
It might the words could be similar or very different, or the way you look, the sound. Knowing that, hey, you know what, I want this child to know that no matter what those issues are, it doesn't matter. The words I hear still mean this.
Right.
Or the facial expressions.
And I'm expected to respond in a certain way, to at least acknowledge that you asked me something.
And it has a meaning.
Yes.
There's meaning behind anybody that has interaction that's directed at me.
Yeah. And I wish that there was a way that we could, I say it from time to time on the show, and I think parents go, oh, I hadn't thought of it that way, because I didn't think of it that way. But I wish we could quiet parents' fears. They're always afraid that they're getting a new therapist who doesn't know what they're doing. And they come to me and run to me because they know I'm going to take their side and go, yes, no, I felt that way too. But then I tell them the other side and I go, but that's not helping you. You're actually getting in the way of your child getting better. And then nobody likes me. But but that's okay. But anyway, we are out of time. How did that go that fast?
It goes so fast.
But I want to thank you so much for everything that you do, and thank you for coming in and doing this for us.
It's
Always
great.
Such a pleasure having you be here.
No, it's wonderful being here.
All right, we're going to take a break, and then we're going to come back with Nancy Allspaw Jackson for Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. We have two amazing guests that are going to be with us, so stick around. We've got a big show for you, plus in the news. We'll be right back.